Hey everyone, I hope you are doing well today. And before I hop in, I want to share something that my bestest friend Joel Perlman is up to because it's extremely special and a big need in this world. It's an innovative and much needed organization to help individuals with special needs called the Danny Plan. You can find it at DANIPLAN.com. It was inspired by his daughter, Danielle, who is nonverbal and has autism. The Danny Plan is for your loved one with special needs, and it's included but not limited to individuals with cognitive issues, disabilities, and even elder care needs. The Danny Plan is simple, it's secure, it's easy to share. And with the Danny Plan, you can organize important information, store it in one place, and share it with trusted family, caregivers, doctors, and more. And you can make it as unique as your child with as much or as little information as you'd like to include. It's completely customizable. The Danny Plan can host the following content, things like about me, key people to contact, medication and therapies, behaviors and frustrations, daily routines and schedules, communication, education, and more. And because it's protected by data encrypted technology and two-factor authentication, I can't talk. Families get peace of mind while loved ones get the respect and dignity they deserve. So please check it out. DannyPlan.com, DANIPLAN.com. Okay, so now on to my guest, Blake Bauer. He's the author of the international best-selling book, You Were Not Born to Suffer. Great title. He has helped thousands of people around the world who could not find lasting solutions from conventional medicine, psychiatry, or religion. His pioneering work centers on learning how to love yourself practically and unconditionally as the key to healing yourself, fulfilling your life's purpose, unlocking your capacity to love others, and realizing your full potential personally and professionally. Now, Blake's formal education includes traditional Chinese medicine, 5-element Chinese medicine, nutritional medicine, herbal healing, psychology, past life regression, therapy, hypnosis, and various other forms of alternative medicine. After years of training with spiritual teachers, healers, and masters from all over the world, Blake is using the wisdom he's learned to teach various forms of mindfulness, meditation, energy medicine, and much more. Today, he's considered by many to be a modern meditation and Qigong master. Based on both his personal experience overcoming deep suffering, addiction, and adversity, as well as his professional success with thousands of people worldwide, he shares what he's found to be the most effective approaches to mental, emotional, and physical health. You're going to love our chat. Blake's a special person. So listen up, listen for those many wisdom nuggets during our conversation. Please enjoy. Blake, welcome to the podcast. So grateful that you've taken the time to chat with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob. I'm excited.
Yeah, and it was fun catching up with you just now before we hit record. Thank you for doing that with me. And I always like to start with a quote if I can. So I pulled one out here. It goes like this. Once I love myself unconditionally, loving another becomes an act of self-love. Do you happen to know who said that and what comes to mind for you when you hear it?
Well, it's so ironic that you picked that specific line because that was the seed that became my book, You Were Not Born to Suffer. So you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just so for the listeners, you said it.
Yes.
That's your quote.
As humbly as that could be said.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, dig into that a little for us.
Well, I think my healing and spiritual journey began with very intense meditation practice. And meditation, as we were talking about before we started recording was something that saved my life. And along the journey, what I realized in retrospect was that my meditation practice helped me create a space of unconditional acceptance and unconditional love in my mind. So psychologically, but I hadn't yet integrated that healthy relationship to myself on every level of my being. So emotionally and physically and within my relationships. But meditation was the thing that helped me kind of reclaim my personal power when I learned that I wasn't my thoughts and I wasn't the voices in my head, and that I could learn to actually choose my thoughts, which was a superpower I didn't know that I had, that I love to now help people understand that, they don't have to be the victim of their mind. And I was tortured mentally and emotionally. And so I spent a number of years learning how to love and accept myself unconditionally on the psychological and mind level. But that wasn't the complete journey for me in learning how to love and accept myself holistically and completely on an emotional level, a physical level, and then within my relationships. And so I preface that because as you're walking a mindful or spiritual path, you come across a lot of concepts like I'm one with the universe, right? Or my ego or my identity is an illusion. And then we also come across themes like we're supposed to be more selfless, right? And be giving and generous. And so I was trying to personally embody all these virtues, which sometimes felt conflicting at the same time. And so here I am trying to be, loving and generous and kind and selfless. And yet there was a very deep part of me that was still suffering because I hadn't fully learned how to love and value and accept myself in deeper places and around deeper traumas and wounds from childhood and my younger life. And so that phrase that you outlined became so important to me because uh, we all have this inertia and this momentum to give and to love and to take care of the people around us. But I found that there was a shadow to that. And the shadow side of that is that most of us never learned how to love ourselves unconditionally, or in other words, have a really healthy relationship to ourselves starting in childhood, which is really self-destructive and remains present often, even when someone starts to wake up and heal and wants to embody mindfulness and wisdom and virtue. And so the idea that once we love ourselves unconditionally, loving another becomes an act of self-love, is identifying that even like, let's say, Rob, I'm loving you and our friendship. There is ultimately no separation between you and I. So when I'm loving you, yes, I'm loving myself. But if I don't have a really healthy, optimal, loving relationship to myself, that love that I'm giving you is not sustainable and has a shadow side to it because my cup will eventually run dry and I will burn out or become resentful or manipulative based on all this stuff I have given to you. And so part of the phrase is that through learning to love myself unconditionally, meaning I learned to fill my cup and have a healthy relationship to myself on a daily basis. So it's consistent and it's sustainable. Then I can love you on a regular basis in a way that's sustainable. So I'm, loving you as I love myself from a healthy way instead of I'm loving you as I love myself from a destructive way, right? Just like the religious or spiritual saying of love your neighbor as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, then you're going to be fighting with your neighbor, which I believe is why the world is such a mess right now, because we've been bypassing this critical phase of human and spiritual development, which is creating this optimal, healthy relationship to the self, which is not just this illusion of the mind, but the self in terms of your thoughts, your emotions, your physical body, and then how you relate to your environment and to your outer world. And so I found that as I learned to love and heal myself on deeper and deeper levels, the walls of my ego identity, my separate kind of fear-based self, started to dissolve. And so that deep, deep self love, that vulnerable, authentic self love, genuinely just became a natural overflowing of love and care for other people. And that boundary of where do I begin and end, and where do you begin and end, palpably dissolved further, not just some kind of, virtuous spiritual idea in my head, but was a lived reality.
Right. I want
So,
to come back to that because I'm thinking, how can we explain that in a way that feels practical? Because it's so beautiful. And I can't imagine anyone listening wouldn't want something like that in their life, but it may seem like, where do I even start with that? And that's where I want to go actually is, where did you start with that? You mentioned you had some challenges growing up, and what got you going to this kind of self-realization, this, and you say meditation saved your life, which is obviously a strong statement. It was that meaningful to you. Can you talk a little bit about that part of your path?
yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And I love making all of this practical. So I'm right there with you. And just so you have kind of a high level sense, in my work, I like to outline for people these, what I call like optimal human habits. And they're like laws, just like the laws of physics and the laws in nature. They're laws that govern having a healthy, optimal relationship to ourselves and to life. And so one of those laws or habits for me is learning what it means to take care of my mind. And so when I was a teenager, I was addicted to drugs and alcohol and abusing drugs and alcohol. And that was motivated by trauma and pain in my upbringing. It was motivated by just deep insecurities and inadequacies and shame and guilt that lived inside of me. That some of it I know where it came from. Some of it I think is a collective kind of unconscious that all of us struggle with. And so I was numbing out, running from myself, and instinctually searching for higher states of consciousness that I never learned how to access naturally. And then another theme I like to talk about is in our culture, we have no healthy forms of initiation. And so I was doing drugs and drinking and getting arrested to kind of become a man and initiate myself in a very self-destructive way. But that's what I was doing. And because I didn't have any healthy, role models, or I think even social frameworks. And I think a lot of people struggle with that in our kind of Western developed world. I think,
Yeah, for sure.
right? We're a little bit lost when it comes to the development of the soul. We focus a lot on, achievement in the
Yes.
system that we've created, which is making a lot of people sick.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty sick as a young man and unhealthy. And so I was arrested a number of times by the time I was 18 for drug possession. And I was coming home one night from an evening of partying when I was 17 and was on a bunch of pills and cannabis and liquor. And I got to a freight train in the middle of the night, one of those large, multi-hundred car freight trains that come through late at night. And I was literally a minute or two from home, and I was delirious and had done this on a regular basis. So I thought I'm fine. And I pulled up to the guardrail of the train tracks, and I was so tired that I thankfully put my car in park and I put my head back and I fell asleep. And I woke up to police knocking on the window, and was delirious and out of it. And I rolled down the window and I said to the officer, "Excuse me, officer, was I driving too slow?" And he said, "Son, you've been sitting here for at least an hour with the car on and the lights running. We've got a call from this house over here." So I got arrested. I got a very bad DUI. And when I was a teenager, I played sports, and in high school, my focus was football, American football, gridiron, as some people outside the U.S. call it.
Yeah.
And I was co-captain of the varsity team with two of my good friends, and we all had offers to play college football. And so I got this horrible DUI. I got kicked off the team halfway through my senior season. And so that was the beginning of my journey because that was my ego. That was my identity. I was a bit arrogant. I thought I was invincible. My friends, that day-to-day lifestyle of, practice and training was my refuge. It was just everything. And then very quickly, I just completely blew it up and sabotaged it and fell into a very dark place inside of myself. So I went from being very, arrogant, I think always a nice person, but, a little bit too reckless and thinking I could kind of get away with, more than was healthy and even, hurt, get away with treating my body, with drugs and alcohol, my lifestyle habits in ways that I thought I could get away with. So burning the candle at, every end at such a young age and everything just shattered. And so I found myself tortured psychologically and emotionally, just waking up every day, just ashamed of myself, paranoid. I didn't know who to go to for help or how to even articulate what I was going through. And so this was senior year of high school. And then obviously the pressure was creeping in of what do I do with my life? I was never one of these kids that knew that I wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, open, this kind of business. I didn't know what I was here to do at that age. And so here I am just waking up every day, struggling and suffering as a young man and ashamed of the fact that I'm suffering. And so not only am I just ashamed, but then I'm ashamed of the fact that I'm suffering. And I didn't know what to do. But I moved forward from 18 and just doing my best, basically. And what happened is naturally, I started to wake up and just ask two questions. How do I free myself from this suffering? Because I felt like life wasn't meant to be so painful. So there was this inner knowing that started to come up, saying life is not meant to be so painful. You're not meant to suffer. So how do I free myself from this pain? And then what am I doing on the planet? What is the purpose of my life? And so from 18, I actually stopped drinking. I stopped getting high and I started facing my suffering head on. And I started changing my lifestyle habits to be healthy in any and every way that I could. So I, started just eating salads all the time and taking vitamins and experimenting with every kind of supplement that you could take and going to yoga and then, eventually going to meditation. I just literally went all in because I felt like a sick animal and I was lost. And so we can dig into any point, but the short version is that from 18 forward, I went to 5 different universities studying psychology, nutrition, all the sciences. And then I went to 2 schools for traditional Chinese medicine, so acupuncture and oriental medicine. And then from 18, developed a spiritual practice, first with yoga almost every day, and then sitting meditation every day. And then when I started studying Chinese medicine, I started practicing Qigong and I fell in love with Qigong. And Qigong is now a very big part of my work and teaching. And I help a lot of people using Qigong in particular because of how effective it is. And then that led to a bunch of realizations where I could see that everything that I was learning in my educational journey, my spiritual journey, my personal growth journey, my search for purpose, all these, expensive, wonderful institutions I went to, the hundreds of books I read, right? Like I'm sure people who listen to your podcast and I'm sure like like all the books on, religion and philosophy and different spiritual paths and quantum physics and, nutrition and all the personal development gurus. Like, if you're a seeker, you start to accumulate, right? These trainings and these books. And so all of that, what I realized for me was that I could see how depression and disease grows in the body as a result of us never learning how to love ourselves as children. And I could see biologically how disease grows, how mental health issues like depression, anxiety grow in the body from us never learning how to develop a healthy, loving, kind relationship to ourselves starting very early in life. And so I was young and I was very naive. And so my next thought was, how do I tell everybody? And this was just before technology really blew up in our lives in terms of smartphones and social media, et cetera. So the only model I knew was I got to write a book and do what these leaders before me have done and start just talking in any and every platform that I could. And so that led to me writing the book that I've written.
Yeah,
So yeah.
interesting. So, I was thinking about this when I was preparing, and when I read that at 18 you made this shift, and I thought, where did that come from? Because most 18-year-olds, I'm speaking very generally, obviously, but my
Mm,
experience is that they just aren't thinking that way, especially like the football player part of your person.
mm,
And 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 I got thinking, where did that come from for you? What pinged you? And you and I were speaking beforehand, and you said you moved to Colorado, I think to Boulder.
mm,
And I'm like, how did you go from Chicago area, Illinois to what was it that drew you and
mm.
was, the secret part of you? Where did that come from?
Well, the moving to Colorado was just this instinctual knowing. I didn't know that at 18 I was putting myself in the mecca of
You
healing
didn't.
and
So you
spirituality in the
didn't go
United
there for
States.
that reason.
No, I could feel energetically. I
Yeah.
literally instinctually, I could just feel like it was a healthy place for me to go when I was
Yeah.
exploring my next steps.
Yeah.
But for me, the couple biggest things were I was in so much pain at that 17, 18-year-old period that I often articulated as I felt like a sick animal and I
Yeah.
felt a very natural desire to isolate myself from people, from
Yeah.
friends and family and even women and dating and all of it. So I was in that much pain that literally waking up every day, the only thing I cared about was healing, was how do I find relief from this mental and emotional pain that I'm in. So that became my true north from the moment I woke up. But then the other big factor that was present was that I had a bit of a soap opera of a childhood. And I grew up around a lot of people, a number of drug addicts who were successful, but then ruined their lives, lost their wealth, their businesses, ruined their marriages, hurt their children. And my biological father was one of those people. And so when I made these like, drastic mistakes, and I looked around and I saw that I was actually following in their footsteps, there was a part of my ego and my pride that kicked in that felt like I don't want to end up like that and I am better than this. And
Mm,
that was a driving factor. So
yeah.
it was suffering, and then it was a healthy part of my pride and my ego that said that's not me, that's not my destiny. And then you can get we can get woo woo with this kind of stuff. I mean,
Go
if you
for it.
believe in reincarnation, some people might say that I chose in this lifetime to come in and wake
Yeah.
up pretty early so that I could help more people from a young age. It's now been over 20 years that all I've done is what we're talking about, and
Yeah.
then served and given back.
Yeah.
So that it resonates, but to people who don't entertain those kind of bigger ideas, I resonate with. I'm sure you've studied some of the Buddhist teachings.
Of course.
There's a point where the Buddha starts to say, I don't care whether you've lived before or whether you live again. I'm interested in helping you be free from suffering now,
Yeah.
and that really resonates with me too
Mm,
because all of the past and all of the future are present in this moment, and if we can find freedom from our self-destructive and self-harming
yeah.
patterns in the present, you heal everything you need to heal, whether you believe in, other lifetimes or not.
Yeah. Was there
So
a book, like the first book that somehow landed in your life that got you going?
it's funny. I had I would say two of my first teachers were Eckhart Tolle and then Van Morrison.
Oh,
So
wow. Interesting.
I used to drive through the mountains in Colorado and just listen to all of his lyrics. And there
Wow.
was something about his soul and his energy and his journey because he suffered a lot. And people didn't take him seriously with his work. And so he valued himself enough to stop at nothing to share his work. And, if you dive into all of his different albums, he was just a very spiritual man, and had a big heart, was kind of like a hopeless romantic, very spiritual. And so I resonated with, and I listened to a lot of his music actually when I was young. And yeah, and then Eckhart Tolle, and I started reading the Buddhist teachings.
Mhm.
And so they really resonated with me at a
Yeah.
young age.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I thought it was interesting when you decided to read your book, which it sounds, or create your book, write your book, that it sounds like it kind of was coming to you,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I loved that you had some failures along the way, but it didn't stop you. I specifically made a note that you contacted His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and asked for an endorsement.
Yes.
I thought that was so great.
Multiple times.
So talk about that. Like as a kid, I'm just picturing, where you're like, you know what? I'm gonna get an endorsement from His Holiness.
Well, my path for me was so serious,
Yeah.
and then growing up in a Western developed, capitalistic society,
Yeah.
I kept thinking, if I could just have a conversation with him and tell him, like, imagine like he was born in Chicago or Detroit,
Totally.
right? And he's like,
Totally.
where did I end up? Like, how did this happen? And so I thought if I could just have a conversation with him, that maybe that he would support this journey, because I knew in myself that it was my everything. It
Yeah.
wasn't vanity. It wasn't like, I wasn't doing it to try and make money. I genuinely just wanted to share with other people what I had gotten lucky to find for myself in this deep, tortured part of me. And so I had the idea for my book when I was 24, and I started pitching to agents and publishers then. And I was rejected over 100 times because everybody's like, you're a kid. Like, how could you know anything about suffering and about life and about these topics you're saying that you're writing about? And I don't know if you like swearing, but
You can
I,
swear.
I was like, fuck you. You have absolutely no idea what I've been through or what I've
Yeah.
overcome. And so, that was the truth inside me that was driving me, and that nobody could take away from me. And, that's a part of what I love to do with my work, is to help people really own and value that part of them,
Yeah.
that not letting external factors determine your self-validation, like not seeking that validation or permission to love yourself, to be true to yourself, to live in integrity, to um, take good care of yourself. And so I was rejected so many times, and that was when I started reaching out to him, to the point that even later on, when I had, so I then, after I was rejected 100 times, I got a contract with one of the biggest personal development publishers in the world when I was 26, to be part of a series with people like Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. If I'm sure you know some of these people.
Sure. Of course.
And then this series didn't do well. And I get a phone call and I get dropped. Like, they say, we're going to do something with you later. We don't know what. And I had been editing my signed contract and manuscript with them for 6 months. And I was heartbroken. I mean, I thought, for me as a young man, it was like a dream come true.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden the carpet was pulled out from underneath my feet. But then that was when I saw the lesson that was in front of me, was that I had put this publishing company on a pedestal, and they had become this false idol to me. And just like we seek love and validation and our self-worth externally from a partner or a family member, there was still this part of me that
Oh
was
yeah.
seeking validation and self-worth from this publisher, for them to say, Blake, you are enough, and your ideas and your experience have value. And there was the other part of me that knew I didn't need that, but I was still seeking it subconsciously. And so when I was 26 and that contract fell through, that's when I decided that, you know what, I'm not going to wait on anyone or anything anymore to tell me that my ideas and what I've been through have value and validity and will help more people. And that's when I found a printer, and started doing graphic design and started finding a distributor. And so I
Yeah.
was living in Australia at the time, and I printed, distributed, marketed, and then planned my own tours. And my self-published book became the number one best-selling spiritual
So great.
title in Australia. And then I had publishers who had rejected me, calling me, asking if they could buy the book and the next book. And then I did the same thing in the UK and in the US. And then a publisher in London bought the book from me in 2015 or 16. And then as I was getting ready to release the updated edition with a traditional publisher, I had a very old school acquisition editor who was getting ready to retire. And I said to him, would you mind writing me a letter to the Dalai Lama? So I kept trying, and
No
we
kidding.
did. And we got another letter back that he was, he's been getting, his health has been declining over the last decade. He's doing less and less. So I got another no, but
Hey,
I thought I may as well try.
it's funny because I did something similar. I tried to have him on the podcast
Yeah,
and I made a couple out. I actually knew somebody who knew somebody.
yeah,
And I got similar, but I said, I'm just happy I got a response, honestly.
yeah.
just even the no was great. I was so excited that I even got a message back.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I
You know what I'm saying? It
understand.
was like, wow,
Yeah,
the Dalai Lama. Okay, it's a secretary, but whatever. So great. I like felt some sort of great energy around that.
yeah.
Can you talk about the healing that has taken place through your practice or in other ways? Because you had some deep trauma and you talked about that, specifically, but even at the outset of our conversation, you talked about, about the healing process for you. And whether it's meditation or other ways, I'm just curious if you could share what have you done and how has it helped you release this trauma.
Mm, thank you. So there's so much that we could cover, and there's so many different modalities and techniques that I
Yeah.
trained in and studied in. So um, feel free to just, dive in or stop me
Let's
wherever
start
we
with
want.
meditation. Let's
Yeah.
start there.
Yeah. So meditation, I would say, has been number one. And I always say when I'm teaching that if you don't go to the core of your mind, there's always going to be a part of you that is unhealed and that you're going to feel the victim, right? So the best way I can make this practical is, let's say I have something I want to express to you, Rob, like I feel hurt or I feel angry, but I'm tortured by a lot of fear or self-doubt in my life. So when I go to try and express to you, typically I'll have some thoughts come up around all the ways this could go wrong, or how I'll be punished, or that things aren't going to work out, which are fear-based thoughts and kind of self-doubt based thoughts. And so if I'm not practiced in meditation, and I'll speak to this specifically in a second, I will miss the moment and the dynamic where I have the feeling, and then there's this habit that kicks into place where the thoughts come up, and then I stop myself basically from expressing myself and being authentic and sticking up for myself. And then I might say, Rob, you're a bully and you're not a nice person, and I feel like the victim to you. But really, I'm the victim of these fear-based thoughts and these self-doubt-based thoughts or shame-based thoughts that I don't even know are kicking into motion. And then basically it means I put myself in situations and environments where I'm hurting myself and letting myself get hurt on a regular basis. And so if we don't ever take the time to sit down and face our mind head on, specifically without a mantra, without music, without visualization. So going back to the tradition of Buddhist meditation or Vipassana meditation or
Right.
Zen meditation, which all kind of come from this same space of I'm going to sit and focus on my breathing in my body and observe and get intimate with the thoughts that come up and then the source of where these thoughts come up. So where do thoughts actually take form and take shape? And do I have to chase them? And do I have to try and stop them? Or can I just accept them unconditionally and become intimate with this part of my mind, psyche, or being? And so, um, to me, meditation will always be the number one most effective, most practical, biggest return on investment in terms of self-healing, change, and growth. And one of the practical ways I like to articulate it is that when we wake up in the morning and you're coming out of sleep, the thoughts we think first thing in the morning are shaping and creating our day, right? And so if you're unconscious and you feel disempowered with that process, then you're going to constantly be living out a day that you feel powerless in. And so part of my prescription when I'm teaching and I'll talk about personally is to wake up in the morning and do a minimum of 10 minutes of meditation in the morning just to calm and soothe the wild horses from running, to stop those parts of your brain that are habituated to fire, which are based on stress and fear and are releasing cortisol into your body, fight or flight responses to your nervous system. And why not calm your nervous system, regulate your nervous system first thing in the morning by focusing on your breathing, focusing on your body, not following those thoughts that are self-harming, that are spreading you thin, et cetera, so that after 10 minutes, you can wake up and be more present, be more intentional, and eventually learn to ping and activate different parts of your brain and different neural networks that serve you moving forward instead of sabotage you from the moment you wake up.
Right.
And so for me, when I wandered into this meditation center when I was 18, I started practicing every morning, first thing in the morning. So I'm 18 years old, waking up, and I started with 10 minutes and 15 minutes and then 20 minutes and then a half hour and then an hour and then eventually 2 hours every morning, because it was the only thing that was bringing me relief from my suffering, because I'm waking up tortured by all these thoughts that are going in different directions, that are contradicting each other. As a result of that, I'm anxious. My heart is beating erratically. I feel anxious. I want to get up and run away from myself because I'm so uncomfortable in myself. And yet I know that if I run from myself, that's not healthy. And the only thing that cut through and broke that dynamic was facing my mind, focusing on my breathing and my body first thing in the morning to recondition my nervous system and my brain. And that is what I would say, that was probably the single thing that has helped me help hundreds of thousands of people now, because it made me feel like I could be in the driver's seat to a very large degree instead of feeling like a victim. Like one of the things I like to say is like your being is like a car that didn't come with a manual. Like you've got this beautiful Ferrari, but nobody taught you how to drive it. And so to me, one of the lessons in driving is how do you use your mind? How do you take care of your mind? How do you train your mind? So,
Yeah.
like I alluded to when we first started talking, for me, what meditation did in terms of healing was my mind was broken and my heart was broken when I began this journey. But my heart was broken from my family. My heart was broken from the mistakes I had made, the damage I had done to myself, from the world I was trying to find my way in. My mind was broken from trauma and abuse growing up, and then drug abuse and alcohol abuse and confusion. And so learning to meditate every day helped me create a container of unconditional acceptance and love on a psychological level. And then over time, what that did was it gave me the strength to hold a space for myself, right? When we're teaching or leading, speaking or leading an event, right? There's this idea that we're holding space for people, right? To have their experience, to have their healing, to have their insight, to grow. So I learned through meditation to hold space for myself, to make room for all the different parts of me emotionally, all the different pain points and traumas inside of me to come up. And then I would be able to meet them with presence and meet them with love and curiosity and be able to get to understand, where is this insecurity coming from? Where is this anger coming from? Where is this sadness coming from? So it was either something in my present, life was triggering it, or it was coming up because it was associated to something in my past that I hadn't faced and felt and integrated yet. So meditation, like I said, it was the beginning of everything. Gave me the strength to train my mind and be present and just be free of suffering to a large extent in the present moment. Then it helped me create this container to welcome and accept all these different parts of me emotionally that previously there was no space inside of me for, right? So when you're thinking a lot and you're addicted to your thinking, there's not a lot of space for your emotions, like to be very present to these deep feelings, because you're just very reactive. You're stuck in your head, you're thinking a lot, you're just very reactive. You're not present with your heart open and feeling. So I guess it empowered me to be present with my heart open and feeling, and then start to understand all the different things I was feeling within myself.
Yeah.
Then obviously, right, then you move from stillness into movement, right? And so with that awareness that you gain through meditation, you can start to observe your conditioned habits. Like, why am I eating this? I'm not hungry, right? Like I'm bored, or I'm numbing my emotions, or I'm numbing all these thoughts. Why am I drinking that when I don't want to drink that? I don't like it, or I don't like how it makes me feel, or, so you gain that awareness, right? You create more self-awareness with which to observe habits and behaviors, and then determine whether they're serving you or not. Are they aligned with your goals, right? Your purpose, what you really want, or are they sabotaging you? Are they hurting you? So, I mean, really, there's just so much.
No, it's great. And,
Yeah.
I want to go to the beginning for a second for people who, maybe some misconceptions. So we're kind of doing meditation 101. I'm going to do right now for a second, but I think it's important because you're I'll call you an advanced meditator in the way you're doing it. But there were some things that I think are important to clarify. First, I love the quote from Anne Lamott, where she says, "My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try to never go there alone."
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I teach meditation, the resistance that I often hear is I just can't sit there and I can't get my mind to settle.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates, in terms of trying to have a practice, somebody who just, they know what's going to happen when they sit down. So they just avoid it at all costs. They're too busy. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not making time for that.
Right.
So how do you teach somebody to overcome that with their mind and actually, get into a practice, a daily type practice?
So I encourage 10 minutes in the morning, first thing. And I really call people out on their excuses and their bullshit, because people need that. They need sometimes a
Some
loving
tough love.
friend. Yeah, they do. They just need something firm, because I think, and I know you know this, if you're a genuine seeker, right? When you talk to someone, when you read something, you are looking for and instinctually feeling out the level of certainty that's present. Like, can I trust this person? Can I trust this process? Do they embody the energy and the presence that I'm looking for? Right. And so I really try to speak to that, because I am not just speaking from something I read in a book. I didn't get like a degree in meditation and say, look, I'm a PhD in meditation.
Yeah.
I was suicidally depressed, didn't want to be on the planet. I saved my life and now have helped thousands of people, save themselves. So I'm coming from this conviction and this knowing that you need to just get over yourself. And basically, I start to talk about themes like, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've got. So you have to try a new approach,
That's
right?
good.
And, you can't, right? You can't solve the problem at the level it was created at. Then I like to say things like, you can't think your way out of this, because your addiction to thinking is the problem. So if you think you can think your way out of this, you're deluding
Right.
yourself, right? And then I say things like, I work with obviously a lot of people who have kids, and I'll say to people, if you can lock yourself in the bathroom to scroll on your phone, or you can lock yourself in the bathroom to cry, you can lock that door, put a blanket on the floor, and meditate in the bathroom if you have to.
That's good.
I tell people they can lay down if they want to in the beginning. I try to meet them where they are, but for me, my non-negotiable is 10 minutes in the morning.
Yeah.
And so like at my retreats, I have people do this in the morning in their rooms before they come to the
Oh,
program
yeah. Yeah.
and
Interesting.
face their mind and experience their mind head on.
Yeah.
And then I think, it just depends. When you're with someone, it's easier to hold their hand through it. So if I'm teaching a meditation, I can say to someone, I don't care what excuse you have, just don't get up. Just sit there and just breathe. I don't care how much you think. You can't do this right or wrong. I'm going to keep guiding you because I'm going to be there with you. And so I keep guiding people back to their breathing and their body. And so I have a little video that I give to all my clients and people who come to my events. So, for example, if you want to make that available for
That
the
would be great.
podcast
Yes.
listeners, it's
Yeah.
just 10 minutes and there's a little bit extra on the end. And it's basically me walking you through it, just like I know you do with your clients. And it's like I'm here with you. And these are the training wheels, right? And then eventually you're going to learn to ride this bike on your own. And so some of the other things that are really important when I'm teaching, Rob, are one thing is I like to share with people that a lot of our discursive thinking and our addiction to thinking is a symptom of repressed emotions. Okay. So when you've been living your life and internalizing a lot of what you need and feel and want, either because you don't even know what you need and feel and want, or you're scared to articulate it for whatever reason, you don't want to hurt your spouse, you don't want to hurt your kids, you don't want to, you want to keep the peace, you're a people pleaser, you don't want to lose your job, whatever the compromise is for you that is leading you to betray and reject yourself. There's all this stuff literally in your body. And so it bubbles up as thoughts saying, hey, it's a symptom. Come down and deal with these deeper issues. And so I say to people, if you keep avoiding that process, things are just going to get get worse. And I'm not afraid to say you're going to get sick if you don't address this, because I watch people get
Physically.
sick, physically sick. You're going to have a breakdown. You're going to have something's going to happen as a wake up call because it has to get you to take this seriously. So, I like to put those kinds of things into perspective for people. And I think I don't even feel bad scaring people into it because I know that that's going to serve them to avoid crashing. So it's kind of like you're a dad.
Right.
It's like sometimes, right, you have to tell your children, like, that's your job. There's a difference between being just a controlling person and actually looking out for someone.
Yeah.
And we just all have these blind spots because we're all, this awakening, this evolution of consciousness is something that everybody's going through and struggling with. And it's so deeply ingrained in us that sometimes I need you to say, Blake, you have ketchup on your face because I don't see the ketchup.
That's great.
So it's my job to say there is ketchup on your face and this is what we can do about it.
You know what? I love the way you've said it numerous times that we're addicted to our thoughts.
Yes.
I haven't actually heard it said that way. And
Yeah.
I really like that. And the thing I'd like you to share is this idea about not having thoughts. Again, back to 101, I think that many people, as I'm listening, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the listener.
Yeah.
And they're saying, wait, I thought you're dealing with all this stuff. You're noticing what's happening in your body, this trauma, this suppressed, things that are blocked, and you're working it with your mind. I thought I wasn't supposed to be doing anything with my mind.
Mm.
Clarify that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we dive into meditation and mindfulness, there's a few really important um, insights that will change anybody's life that don't know these. One is you are not your thoughts and you're not the voices in your head. They're just a part of you. So for a lot of people, before they start meditating and then even throughout their meditation practice, they are over-identified with the thoughts in their head that they think and believe that that's who they are. And then we also tend to believe everything we think, right? And then if you take a step back and you ask yourself, how many times have I thought something but then it proved to be different, right? Or I was worried about something, or I was doing disaster thinking and it didn't turn out as bad as I thought. Or we were delusional with our hope, right? And we were so optimistic that this is going to be perfect. And maybe you're dating and you thought you found your soulmate, right? And then you found that person later breaks your heart worse than anybody has ever hurt you. So maybe your hope was not accurate either, right? And so the moral of the story is we also don't want to believe everything that we think. Okay. But when we don't have a meditation practice, that sounds like a foreign language, right? If it sounds like gibberish. And so when you sit down and you start focusing on your breathing and your body, and you notice that you're thinking, and in the tradition that I think we both practice in, when you say the word thinking or some kind of cue that brings you back to your breathing and your body. So basically, instead of getting lost in your thoughts, and those thoughts can be analyzing, those thoughts can be fantasizing, those thoughts can be about the future, those thoughts can be about the past. But regardless of what those thoughts are, they're still just thoughts. And the intention is to come back to your breathing and your body. So we want to shift our attention and our focus to our breathing and to our body as a medicine to being so stuck up in our head, so addicted to thinking. And so the only way to train ourselves is to focus on the breathing and the body. So that's the medicine. And over time, you become more and more aware and sensitive to your physical body, to your breathing, to the energy of your whole body. And then you start to see, oh, I'm lost in thought, right? And then as a teacher, we talk about the idea of if you are your thoughts and if you are the voice in your head, then what is the part of you that can say, oh, I was just lost in thought? What's the part of you that could say, I was thinking about dinner, or I was thinking about my husband, or I was thinking about my worries and my fears? Well, what was the part of you that was aware that you were thinking? And that's the part of ourselves that we start to become very intimate with through meditation, which some people call your awareness, your consciousness, your higher self, your soul, your bigger self, whatever you want to call it. But eventually, and some of you might see this video, and some of you are going to hear this in a recording, but what happens is as you meditate, the space between your awareness and your consciousness and your thinking mind starts to grow, and there starts to become more and more space inside of you between the awareness, the higher self, and all the thoughts and all the beliefs. And so the secret is to grow that space and to get to know that space, because in that space is where you get to choose what you think. You get to choose not to get tortured by a negative thought that comes up. That's where when someone swears at you or is mean to you, instead of just unconsciously responding and hurting them back and creating more of a mess, you can pause, take a deep breath, and choose how you respond and choose what you say, choose how you say it so that you don't stoop to that level or continue the chain of pain. And so I would say that that would be 101 is sitting down, focusing on your breathing and your body. It doesn't matter how much you think. It doesn't matter what you think about. The key is that you sit there for 10 minutes instead of chasing the wild horses, right? Like we talk about this theme that your mind is like a wild horse, right? And so, and we don't have control over the horse. We are being dragged by the horse. And I often joke that I don't have one horse. I live at the racetrack. Like I wake up and I got all these horses out of the gate and I'm being dragged right in 12 different directions for dear life, like bloodied, hitting rocks. And that's how really a lot of us feel. And so if you can just sit for 10 minutes and not let the horses drag you, that is the key. It doesn't matter how much you think. It doesn't matter how frustrated you get. It doesn't even matter how much you wiggle, even though eventually I like to help people stop fidgeting and moving. But the key is to just sit. And, you know, I did a talk recently with Drala, and the theme of the talk was that when you sit to meditate, you are actually saying to yourself, I am worthy of some peace. And I think that's one of the most important messages
Yeah,
is
that
like
is good.
sitting down. You are saying to yourself, this is what you're communicating to your subconscious, to your body, your heart, your mind, your organs, your cells, and the people around you, that no matter what is going on, no matter how much stress, no matter how many bills, no matter how many worries you have, no matter how high interest rates are or how expensive it is to buy a home, you are still worthy of some peace.
Yeah, that is
And
so good.
and it doesn't matter, like, and you could come to a retreat, you could spend $100,000 to go touch the forehead of a guru, but nobody can wake up right in the morning and say to you, you are worthy of some peace and it get to you unless you do.
Yeah.
So like you have to say, I'm worthy of just not running for 10 minutes, not chasing, not being afraid,
Yeah.
right? It's like, so that to me is you're saying I'm worthy of some peace, which becomes I'm worthy of health. I'm
Yeah.
worthy of happiness. I'm
And
worthy of,
you write about this in terms of having affirmations.
yeah,
Am I picking up on, is that kind of what you're sharing at this time? I mean, where, when you start to get that space, you change your thought process and turn them into sort of an affirmation?
yeah, absolutely. I think like if you think about, for you and I here and anybody who's listening, think about your childhood, right? And you are born into this environment where you're constantly berated and it's impressed upon you what your parents believe and think. Then you go to school and it's what they believe and think, right? And then you go to, if you're religious, it's whatever your priest or your rabbi or your religious upbringing puts on you. Like, this is what you should think. Like, and so by the time you start to go through this process, typically you have so much conditioning and your thinking and your belief system is so limited that first step again is creating some space, right? We need some space because if you're just consumed by the thoughts you're already addicted to and the stress and the worries you're addicted to, there's going to be no space for any of this. So you need to stop and give yourself a little bit of space. And then you get to open to new possibilities, right? When there's space, then there's potential for fresh air and light to come in and new possibilities. And then that's where I talk about this superpower, which is that nobody ever taught us that we could choose our thoughts. And so an affirmation is like a high vibration, healthy, positive thought. So instead of just thinking, I'm really worried about my day and I'm worried about paying my bills and am I going to get everything done? You could be sitting in the car, take a few deep breaths, and just, it's, if you grew up in a religious family, it's very similar to prayer. And you could say something like, everything's going to be okay, or I am one with all consciousness, or I deserve healthy love. And just entering this idea into your brain and your consciousness opens you up to think about something like when I say to someone, I'm deserving of healthy love. And if they've never heard that, the idea of like, well, I deserve healthy love is like, oh my God, like that's, it's so foreign. But then you start to ask, well, why don't I think like that?
Yeah.
Why don't I treat myself and think I deserve healthy love? Or I work very hard and I am worthy of being appreciated in the workplace, right? It one thing if you're lazy and you don't do anything, but if you work hard and you invest and you're committed, I work hard and I am worthy because of my behavior. I'm worthy of being valued in the workplace. I am worthy of a seat at the table. And I actually prefer worthy over deserving because I feel like deserving
Yeah.
is often very entitled. But if you are actually giving what you hope to get, you are worthy of the things that you're asking for. But because of our conditioning, like if we grew up with a father that played the role of the provider and was never really happy and maybe ate a little too much and drank too much, to him, the idea of I can make a living doing what I love sounds like bullshit, right? But what if from a little young age, someone told him, you can make a living doing what you love? And maybe then, as this older man, he wouldn't be numbing out and overeating and be angry and bitter, right? Or you look at a woman that played the role of a traditional wife and mother, and she was conditioned to sacrifice herself and to people please all the time. And what if, as a little girl, she was taught that she's worthy of healthy love, and it's okay for her to do self-care. And she had these thoughts in her consciousness, right? Like things would go very differently. She wouldn't get breast cancer. She wouldn't probably get sick at the age she got sick, or she wouldn't be so angry and reactive, at home behind closed doors. And so these little affirmations are higher vibration thoughts that help open us to possibilities, see things we couldn't see, but then on a very biological and practical level, they start to ping parts of your brain, new neural networks, which you want, and we all need to over time get to fire. So we're not coming from the fear-based, like limbic part of the brain where we're just stuck, right, in fear and guilt and shame and insecurity and fight or flight. And so an affirmation like I'm worthy of healthy love, or I can make a living doing something I'm passionate about, or I can trust life. I can trust the universe. It's okay for me to trust myself. I don't need to seek validation outside of myself. All these things start to help you turn on parts of your brain that are going to help you move forward, that then lead to healthier biochemical and chemical reactions in the brain. So instead of producing cortisol, you start producing dopamine and serotonin and these healthy chemicals where you become your own pharmacy and you feel so good naturally from meditating that you don't feel like you need to go smoke the joint or drink the wine or pop the pill, because you finally learned that your own brain is a pharmacy that you can turn on and off if you know how to. But like I was saying, we all have this Ferrari that nobody taught us how to use. And once you learn how to use it, this is the kind of magic that can happen. And affirmations are one of those tools.
So good. And in the book, which you mentioned earlier, You Were Not Born to Suffer, there are lists of affirmations in there. So
Yes.
get the book and read the affirmations, see what resonates for you in any particular time in your life, and use them.
Yes, absolutely.
And so just as we wrap here, Blake, I wanted to ask you, who has been the most influential person in your life while you've been on this journey?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that. Part of my journey has been, um, for a long time, I was looking outside of myself, and I would go to all these gurus and all these teachers, and I think eventually I would realize that they're just human like me. But for a long time, I had this illusion of like these people are perfect, or you know, I think I was looking for an example of, I think, wisdom and virtue and being switched on, and this combination of being in the world but not of it, but also not being like kind of spiritually bypassing and kind of trying to pretend to be something.
Yeah.
And so, just like my search for love and my relationships with women and my search for purpose and all the different disappointments that I found in seeking externally, I realized that I had to become what I was looking for. And so the most important thing that I would want to give to people listening is to empower them, is that if you're looking for love, you have to become love. If you're looking for peace, you have to become peace. If you're looking for respect, you have to become self-respect. You have to become respect. So I've experienced actually a lot of disappointment with people because of my own illusions about expectations and false idols and things like that.
That's
And it
great.
led me to this awareness of I have to become what I'm looking for. But I would say for me, the truth is, I mean, all the texts I read have been amazing at helping me find clarity. They were contrast to lead me in the way I needed to go. But I'd say the people in my life, like family and loved ones, I would say are probably number one, because the saying, if you think you're enlightened, go home to your family.
Yes. I love that.
Because because
the greatest.
they've helped my growth the most, because they have pushed my buttons the most. And
Yeah.
so because I take my work and my past so seriously, if I can't embody love and kindness and awareness when I'm the most triggered,
Yeah.
right? When I'm the most, my trauma is most activated with these people, then I'm not being real. I'm not like owning my end of this bargain. And so for me, I'd say the people close to me, because I look at them as my teachers. And so as someone who has sought out all these famous people and, so quote unquote gurus, and read all the traditional texts of the greatest thinkers, and I appreciate all of them, I would say the people in my life where I had to practice my teaching and what I was learning like in real time would probably be the people that I'm, the most grateful for and most humbled by. Um, so
I love that. Blake, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today for the podcast. I'm so grateful to you.
Oh, thank you, Rob. It was lovely. I hope that it, is helpful for whoever listens.
Oh, it is. I always like to say there are many wisdom nuggets in these kinds of conversations, and there were plenty today. And to all the loyal listeners out there, as always, I greatly appreciate you spending time with us today. And I wish you all much love and gratitude.